Silvio is the perfect middle manager. I would liken him to Jay Landsman on The Wire. Silvio was way better than Tony at keeping the troopers happy and mitigating issues. He always seems to know the mood in the room, even when Tony doesn't or simply doesn't care. Perceptive and intelligent, Silvio possesses incomparable diplomacy skills, even with an extremely emotional and volatile man as his boss.
I count on you to be the most level-headed guy I got.
Every boss needs a Silvio in their life, a guy who is reliable and loyal, but also not afraid to tell you when he thinks you're wrong, to offer an alternative perspective. Silvio possesses numerous great traits which are exercised routinely. For one, he isn't afraid to call out bullshit when he hears it.
I'm gonna give that little fuck our mats. He'll never forget. As soon as we can locate him.
He's in that housing project in fucking Booton.
The favoritism Tony still shows for our fucking cousin.
For all your uncles down for you? I need to get into specifics.
He tells Tony what he needs to hear, not what he wants to hear. Like when he calls Mr. Type A personality out on not wanting to give in to New York over the wild animal. And when Tony juvenilely gets it all in his face, he handles this escalation perfectly with his line,
You need me for anything else?
Tony is also unable to bully Silvio into submission, an example being the whole Columbus thing. When rather potentially get embarrassed in front of the crew, he has everyone walk out so he can talk directly with Sil.
I can't turn the other cheek on this.
I know, but we're running a business here. Don't you all got something to do?
And Sil is so clever that he uses this talk to get Tony on board with his cause, using his skills of persuasion to motivate Tony by feeding his ego.
I think the guys, and myself too, we need your leadership on this.
He also calls Tony out on the veto situation, tells Tony he was wrong for hitting Ralph, and even gives him the options.
Make him disappear or make nice. You only got two choices.
He's also full of wisdom and helpful advice.
You're only as good as your last envelope. You know that.
Also, for someone who seems to have the same constipated expression for 6 seasons straight, the man is pretty expressive without having to say anything, like his face when Tony tells the crew about Chris's death, which many fans interpret him as reading between the lines. There's also his face when Tony says, "Fuck that honor and loyalty shit," and when Tony says Vito is a come-from-behind kind of guy.
He's a come-from-behind kind of guy.
The Fat Dom situation probably best encapsulates him. He tries to get him to leave, recognizing immediately that there is high tension in the room. Sil does his best to cool off Dom's remarks to Carlo, tries to give the idiotic Dom an out, but when Dom goes too far, Sil is the first to hit him. One thing I like about Sil is that he has an underrated, vague, but at the same time direct way with words.
Let's say he shows up. You gonna kiss this guy on both cheeks? I need to get into specifics. I genuinely don't think there's anything to gain by keeping him around. Measures were taken. When I came in to open up one morning, there you were with your head half in the toilet. Your hair was in the toilet water. Disgusting. My business, I'm around a lot of women. That one ain't getting laid.
Another interesting thing to note about Silvio is that his fierce loyalty is symbolized by his kills. He doesn't get his hands dirty often, but when he does, it appears there's a theme to the murders done by Silvio. He took out Jimmy, Puss, and Adriana, who were rats, and Bert Gervasi was taken out for betraying the family. Though the Fat Dom kill wasn't a premeditated murder, it was also a case of taking out someone who stepped out of line. Everyone feels comfortable around Silvio due to his people management skills. This allows Silvio to gain information, to have his ear to the street, which is a key trait of his. He always seems to know what's going on and is aware of the backdrop concerning any situation. Remember when Albert and Patsy want to talk shit about Tony off the record? Sil makes an excuse and walks away from the table, reading the room and knowing the two guys need to vent. But as consigliere, these guys can't slag off Tony in front of him and he not report it. What if they say something that Tony needs to hear? And at the same time, he wouldn't want it known that he was part of a public meeting where Tony was getting slammed. So he walks away temporarily. But of course, he'll also be making a mental note about Patsy and Albert. There is a solitary crack in the Silvio loyalty argument, the Christopher floor tile situation. Acting capo Chris, who got the job over the likes of Patsy, goes through a Napoleon complex but is chastised by Tony for allowing theft on the lucrative construction site. Later, Sil gives Patsy the okay to steal floor tiles from the site, telling him he's got his back when it comes to Tony. When Tony confronts him, Silvio uses those same vague but direct communication skills to mitigate the issue,
Timeline got fucked up.
while simultaneously sending Tony a clear message that this situation made him unhappy. It's controlled rebellion. This entire situation is a great example of how shrewd Silvio is. He knowingly disobeys Tony, sabotages Christopher, who had essentially become a rival overnight and now looks bad because of the floor tile job, gives the okay on a heist that will make Patsy happy, who was upset at being passed over, and he holds his ground in the basement meeting with Tony, because this was the plan all along and he knew a confrontation with Tony would happen down the line. He even has the money ready for him. It isn't just about Patsy. If anything, Silvio uses Patsy's name as cover and insulation for himself to highlight how he himself feels marginalized by Christopher messing with the hierarchy. Maybe he wanted to have control over Paulie's crew, or at least his name thrown into the mix. At the very least, there's several examples which suggest Silvio doesn't approve of Chris becoming a temporary captain, like the way he announces it, and emphasizing to Chris that the decision comes from Tony alone. It's the one time where Silvio won't let a situation pass him without him getting the appropriate recognition from the big man, without showing him that he, Silvio, is just as integral to the family as Chris is, and is able to screw things up if he so chooses. Chris is rising through the ranks via nepotism at the expense of not just Patsy but himself. "I'm still here," Silvio is saying, "and I'm more valuable than Christopher." Sil tests the boundaries to assure himself where he stands with Tony. Tony gets the message, reassures his old friend, money is exchanged, and the case is closed, all done in professional fashion. Plus, the crew would see that Silvio acknowledged what Tony's nepotism for Chris was doing for morale, and he did something about it. Rather than be an example of disloyalty, this situation was actually a very loyal thing to do, putting yourself in harm's way in order to keep a happy shop. There is more to be said on this situation, especially the symbolism with Silvio and the glue, but this video is getting pretty long.
Still going, this asshole.
So I'll end it there.